Morning, folks. So Jeremy just introduced me. Again, my name is Tom McLaughlin from Serverless Ops. It's a local AWS cloud and DevOps consulting company with a specialty in working with startups and working with serverless. And I'm here today to present to you Serverless DevOps. What do we do when the server goes away? Now, this isn't a purely serverless talk. It's actually a bit of a DevOps talk too. Okay, it's about how technology affects people and process, particularly how serverless technology affects an ops person like me and affects the process of organizing people within our companies. So I started working with Lambda about 2 years ago. And when I first started, I had this very uneasy feeling of what would happen. I had this task, which was to take some JSON from one API and shove it into another API. And I didn't feel really like spinning up an auto-scaling group and doing any sort of configuration management work, so I went the serverless route for the first time. What I ended up doing was eliminating some hours of toil and focusing on my core problem. Now, I wasn't actually in operations at the time of this work, so what I had also just done was bypass my old team. And that reminded me of a rough incident in my career. There is a story behind this. I was on the technical operations team of a SaaS product company around here. And I had already left one company that told me, we're never doing this DevOps thing. So I'm thinking to myself, great, I'm ahead of the pack. I'm pretty safe in my career. And one day, my VP of engineering said to me, if you don't code, then you're just an IT person here. And it's like the smallest feeling moment in my career. And there's no happy ending to this story. I left a few months later, okay? I didn't wait around to get fired because I was somehow like no longer, valuable to my company. So how many of you folks can actually relate to this story? Eh? How many of you folks struggled with DevOps adoption, or you had friends and coworkers that struggled with this? You watched successive bimodal IT reorgs in your organization and those people that kept being left in sad mode. As a result of that incident, I am regularly worried about being replaced or no longer qualified for my own job. And when I started looking at serverless, I started to become concerned that there would be a repeat of this. But when I walk into a potential new client, this is what I find. My target clients have little to no operational expertise. Operations is somebody's part-time job because they understand how to use AWS and create a few things. Last week, I saw a Cassandra outage and data loss because developers put a Cassandra ring into production with absolutely no replication, and it's been running like that for well over a year. I saw someone cringe. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, that's not serverless. Like, you have DynamoDB, and they take care of that for you, right? They take care of the data durability. But I'll ask you this. How many of you folks have a deletion policy on your DynamoDB tables in CloudFormation? How many of you know how CloudFormation behaves when you make a configuration change and it wants to replace your table? Some of you might think, oh, CloudFormation will keep me from shooting myself in the foot. It only works if you explicitly name your tables. If you use CloudFormation generated names, it will drop your table and your data. And I think a few people are going to be thinking about this right now and like, I'm going to check this when I go back to work tomorrow. We also found IAM keys in code, and that's the least troubling part of this story. Those IAM keys allowed an application to write production data to what we thought was a non-production account to be served up to users. There is a ton of problems to unpack in that incident. And just going serverless is not going to make those sort of issues go away. Oop, hold on a second. There we go. Okay, my experience has given me pretty good feeling that my expertise is going to continue to be useful within our organizations. But we need to figure out what our role is going to be and how we remain relevant to them. And that may require us to learn some new skills. So let's get on with this. What is serverless? Has like every other talk had this slide before? Yeah. So today you're going to get like 10 vaguely similar but mildly conflicting definitions that leave you confused. If you go to a DevOps Days conference, you're used to this feeling. So I'm gonna skip giving you a definition and let you believe whatever you want to believe about serverless. We're gonna head on to something that you can build that's serverless, all right? I got a user. They're interacting with a delightful, front-end web application, all right? So that's we got an S3 bucket fronted by CloudFront, and that bucket's got HTML, images, CSS, client-side JavaScript, and there's no Nginx for me to bother dealing with, okay? Awesome. And if you look closely, you'll notice there's not even a Lambda function in there. Some of you folks have been building serverless applications without even really knowing it. So let's move on further down the road. We got this yellow blocky thing right here. That's an API gateway. What do I do with an API gateway? Well, I give it an HTTP verb and a route, and I say, if you post some JSON to this endpoint, it's gonna trigger that Lambda function, which is gonna look at that JSON and kind of just shove it into DynamoDB right there. And then we got this state change on DynamoDB. Well, that state change event triggers a worker Lambda function, which is gonna take that event and it's gonna shove it into this question mark here that represents your understanding of what your organization does and how it actually creates value, such as the value to, pay your salary. And at the end, there we go. There's some value right there. Awesome. So in this application, let's ask ourselves, where does someone like me, an ops person, belong? Okay, let's explore this. And let's get this out of the way. Get rid of your ops team. I'm serious. I say this as an operations person, and I hope this wakes a few people up. Get rid of it, okay? I really mean this. In the fictional beginning, we had just these two teams, these two functionally aligned teams called Dev and Ops. And then DevOps started happening, and we said, for a lot of us, we tore down the wall between the silos, and then DevOps happened, right? And how many times have you heard tear down the walls between silos in the past 8 years in a conference talk? But this is more like the actual reality of a product company, okay? These multiple functionally aligned teams that all exist in the service delivery process. And all these teams are needed to get something out the door, but they're all traveling in their own direction. They all have their own wants, needs, and success criteria. Well, product engineering organizations started to realize this wasn't a very efficient manner of getting things out the door. So they formed product pods, feature teams. We're just going to call them value delivery teams, okay? It's these cross-functional teams aligned along a single business capability or problem. And don't just call them dev teams, okay? They got a PM, they got a designer. What we commonly refer to dev teams have become much more than that by adding these different functions to these teams. But ops, we got left out of this. We're usually over here just like operating the levers of the infrastructure. We're too busy. While we've been talking amongst ourselves in the DevOps world about, the DevOps principle of flow because we all read the DevOps handbook, hey, other teams in our organizations have actually been reorganizing to achieve that. And if your organization goes serverless first, that feature team doesn't really need you to reach the user. You're now no longer a part of the value delivery stream. Your only option is to play toll booth operator. And that means your job only exists out of policy and not actual need or function. And even then, what are you going to do? You're going to lock down CloudFormation or Terraform from people and say you can't touch that? Like, they need that in order to, your developers need that in order to do their job. So your choice, again, is to remain secluded and potentially bypassed, or this is how I see ops teams actually going away. It's us leaving these functionally aligned teams and joining these value delivery teams directly. It's the ops team goes away, not actual ops people. And this to me is this DevOps promised land that many of us have been talking about for ages, okay? A small team of people with different skills, all used to efficiently deliver value to a waiting user. So I've left my ops team, I've joined this value delivery team. What do? What does my job look like each day? And some of the folks in the community, probably Ben Kehoe, like to use the term different ops. And what I'm going to describe is going to look vaguely familiar to you. It's just going to look a little different. That's all. Serverless doesn't make operations go away. It just changes the problems that you have to solve. So what am I going to do? Every single team that goes serverless is going to have this excruciating argument at some point in the team's lifetime. You're going to have an argument over whether or not a Lambda function should directly invoke another Lambda function, or if a Lambda function should go through API gateway. You will see people argue for hours about this. And some of you folks know the Slack talk that I'm referring to. So, look, you have an ops person that is more than capable, highly capable of reaching of researching this problem and finding a solution. More than capable of rapidly building a POC and helping to solve your concerns around performance, cost, scalability, usability, et cetera, with actual data. Instrument your functions so that they're actually sending some information up to Thundra, Epsagon, or IO pipe, all right? And then take a tool like Artillery. Just drive invocations. And then analyze the data, okay? Make a recommendation. Even better, write up your analysis. Create a decision matrix to help people actually make the same, to guide them when this question comes up again. And that's an easy problem, all right? This is the periodic table of Amazon services. This is what you're going to be cobbling together with a bunch of Lambda functions. Like, there's a lot of services up there. Does anybody even know what most of these services are? Anybody? Nope. Do you know how they all work? How they all perform? Their limitations, their gotchas? Understanding and explaining other people's technology has been just one of the core tasks of my job as an ops person my entire career. Let's move on and talk about failure. It's a very sparse slide right there. I should be a member of your design and PR reviews because sooner or later someone's going to try and ship this. It's a Lambda function subscribed to an SNS topic that writes to a DynamoDB table. Look, the person who thinks the cloud is reliable today is going to think the cloud is reliable tomorrow. Sure, SNS is going to do a few retries for you. What happens when that's not enough? Well, I want to be in there and make sure, yeah, okay, good, you configured a dead letter queue. So if we have invocations that fail, we're going to catch these events so that we can analyze them. Oh, we also have an alert. We have an alert that's going to go to Slack, so I can actually know, okay, hey, there's some things that we need to research, figure out what's going on. We have a high water alert. That alert's going to wake me up when everything just starts dropping on the floor for some unexplained reason. But we can't stop there. We got to code, all right? You can't, as an ops person in a serverless environment, stick to just architecture and configuration. I got into ops because I didn't want to code. I had an awful time with C++ in college and said I never want to do this ever again. But there's like no way you can actually be successful as an ops person without that ability anymore. Okay, how can you fully solve why your database is failing if you can't understand the code that's involved? So let's try and help a DynamoDB write succeed. Hey, here we go. We got a really simple function. It takes in a record and we just put it in DynamoDB. Awesome. We just assume it's gonna succeed each time. Right. I do my review. Perhaps I want to actually put a retry decorator on that. I want to give it an extra chance just in case. I also want to be able to test this because I want to make sure not only did I solve a potential problem, I want to make sure that I'm not creating more problems. So I want to make sure that my team has handy the tools to perhaps simulate traffic before we make a change and know that we're not going to take things down. Let's go a little further down in the user chain, okay? Here's a chain of events starting with my user, and it's still failing. That's because my user is an absolute troll. And what they've been doing is sending fuzzed data to my application. They just want to see what happens. What happens if I replace my longitude and latitude coordinates that should be numbers with emojis? People will do this. And here's the thing, that bug is not necessarily in that first function. That bug is it was not in that second function, it's in the first one. It's in the first one where somebody forgot to actually validate the inputs of what's coming into our application. So again, I need to be able to traverse service boundaries. I need to even potentially be able to traverse team boundaries to work upstream with where the data is being generated in order to fix my issues. Here's some things that I'm boldly going to say most of you are not doing. Running game days. How many people here actively, regularly run game days? Thanks, Liz. Right. This is perhaps something we should be doing more regularly, and so that when something actually happens at 3 a.m., we're prepared for it. Chaos engineering. Anybody actually do that? Nope. Yep. These are topics you mostly only see in conference talks and blog posts and at Netflix. If I'm not spending my time trying to operate the levers of the infrastructure, I can do so much more. I can do all these things that only like these top tier, mature organizations seem to do. Now let's talk about shifting. Past few years in the tech world, we've been talking about shifting left, right? Okay? But shifting left. That shift left doesn't end at development. It continues on to product. If you're saving time and toil, not operating infrastructure, I'm going to challenge you to not spend all of that newfound time on throwing more technology at your problems, okay? I'm going to challenge you to spend more time as individuals and as a team to understanding what you're building, why you're building it, how does this actually contribute to your business, and how do I tell if we're actually producing value, okay? I talked to a company last week. This was awesome. They said to me, we have an estimated market size of 100,000 people globally, right? Low transaction volume, high transaction volume, high transaction value. And yeah, great. It makes serverless a very attractive thing to a company like this. Now, I'm actually used to high volume, low value transactions. It's a lot of SaaS companies. Errors in systems that I've worked in are a little bit more tolerable. We return some API errors, whatever. People come back, we're good. But not this company. a single error might be like, 5 digits of revenue right there, and you don't know when that 5 digits is coming back. So there's a company where I thought, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I would need to probably spend less time thinking about architecting for large scale, because there aren't a lot of people in the market, and more time architecting to ensure, to handle and catch failure. How many people regularly work with your product teams, okay, and talk about growth metrics for your applications or your features? Do you actually know what scale of usage you need to support? Or do you kind of just wing it? Do you just blindly assume that more scale is going to be better? You should be working with your PMs and actually saying, okay, well, what are the growth, what are the real and projected growth numbers for this? And I want to use that sort of information to help me inform and understand what my application needs to look like tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. And I want to be able to use that in order to plan work. I want to say, okay, we know where the scale points are. We know what growth looks like. So we can do this now, but we have to make sure that we take care of this, say about a year and a half out. Here's a fun one. How about user sentiment? And I just arbitrarily chose application performance, all right? How many people feel that they say they can confidently say they know what good enough means for their application when it comes to scale or performance? Does anyone have like an actual formula for determining that, for reviewing that? So if you're re-architecting your application, see right here, like this application, it's like, users are rating it a 6 out of 10. You're re-architecting this for performance, and you're not budging user sentiment. You now need to start thinking about a few things, okay? Are you trying to chase like a service objective that isn't necessary? Do you have actually much bigger problems than is it fast enough that you need to be addressing instead? As a team, do you want to throw developers at the problem of building an application that supports 1 million users? Or do you want to throw developers at the problems to attract 1 million users? You have limited headcount, you have limited time, you're going to have to apportion correctly. And as an ops person, architecture and scale problems, perfectly suitable for me. I don't know how to code, how to build features, but this other work, yep. So, you can start looking at your work, or you can keep looking at your work as, okay, I got an API gateway, triggers a Lambda function, there's a DynamoDB table. But really, we need to start actually, moving past that and towards this. I have a customer and I want them to be delighted. They're going to interact with some sort of interface. And that interface is going to trigger some business logic that's going to take data from them and shove it into DynamoDB because we find it valuable. And then, great, we have some value out at the end. We need to be shifting closer to product and understanding these sort of things, okay? Serverless doesn't guarantee you that you're gonna create value. We talk about, oh great, fast iteration, you're gonna get things out the door, and you're gonna quickly create value, but the reality is, serverless is also a very efficient means of building and delivering garbage to your users too. Like, that's what happens if you just keep your head down and you're only focusing on the technical bits of serverless and not what people actually use. We got to understand how our organizations work, how they sustain themselves, what they value. We've removed much of the infrastructure details with serverless, so you can spend your time on other things that aren't technology. With your new time. Again, spend more time looking at your product adoption metrics. Look at your customer sentiment. Spend time with your support teams and look at the amount of support tickets that are being generated by what you're delivering. Let's take this a step further. How many folks here know what the term persona means when somebody uses that in a meeting in your company? Good, good, a bunch of you. Yes. How many people know the difference between a user persona and a buyer persona and can explain the difference in their company? Okay, yes. Look, this is my user, all right? And I want to build things for them because that's what actually gives my work meaning, all right? I want to focus less on tech and more on this. And that's what we're doing with serverless. We're abstracting the technical bits away so we can focus on making this person happy. Thank you. I wrote a book too called Serverless DevOps. So if you want to read the really long version of this talk, just go ahead. It's free too. I don't even ask for your email address. So thank you.